Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy's Ted.
Check out what we just stole from the Don't Stop Thinking YouTube channel.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
Alright, so we were just watching CJ over at Don't Stop Thinking. He's got a great video about using the Infinity Wars and the Marvel MCU in order to help develop and bring NPCs into your world and make them more valuable. And also, like, just like Infinity War, have like a mega conflict where your player characters are involved, but so are a whole cast of NPCs. He gives a lot of great advice on that. So we wanted to call attention to that, as well as maybe add some of our own thoughts on it.
Absolutely. So his concept is to create this titanic, epic finale, and have NPCs involved. But he makes sure that you're aware that ultimately this is still the player's story. They have to be the main characters, and I have to 100% agree with that statement. NPCs can do a lot of cool things. But the heroes, the main characters, your players at the table need to be the one to deal that final blow and to be, the ones that get to complete this legend, this great story.
Now, one of the important things he kind of brings up, and that is kind of the idea of starting with the end in mind, like having an end goal that your players are going to work towards, so that you know what kind of NPCs are going to get involved between that. Now, the only thing I would add to that is, yes, you need an end goal. You don't always need to know how everyone's going to interact with that, because I'm a real big fan of reverse engineering your game, right? Like, just because you didn't plan something from the beginning doesn't mean you can't go in that direction and pretend you did.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of great advice in the things that players just say at the table that they might just say as a casual throw off that a GM might hear and be like, "Ooh, I like that." They might give you a diabolical scheme when they're like, "Oh my God, this NPC, he's been working against us the entire time." Well, maybe he wasn't, but that's not saying he couldn't be. And you can take that player-driven comment and turn that into a meaningful story element that you hadn't initially planned. And then the player gets to feel smart for figuring it out.
Yeah, they're going to feel so much better about that. So CJ brings up a couple strategies for introducing your NPCs and making them more memorable, and ways for your players to kind of keep them fresh in their mind and separate the information. Now, one of the things he talks about is, making them memorable either through their personalities or, their appearance or traits that they have. These are all good things.
Right, or what abilities that they might be able to bring to the table.
Right, and then he talks about things like chunking, association, and method of LOCI. And you can kind of go over there and see how he integrates them. But, for the most part, chunking is like grouping NPCs together. Association is, if I think of this thing or place, I'm going to think of this NPC. And then method of LOCI is something completely different. That is more of like a memorization technique than anything.
And it actually is a real thing that exists in mental preparation.
Yeah. So now, but when I was like watching the video, I started thinking, there's some other places where they do a really good job of introducing the NPCs. And then later on, they have a huge role to play in this like climatic way at the end of the story. The Hobbit is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
You go through all the trials and tribulations of Bilbo and the dwarves, and along the way they meet all these characters, and some of them they're kind of antagonistic against each other, and you go all the way to the end, and I'm sorry, spoilers if you're not familiar with The Hobbit, and they infiltrate Smaug, and Smaug comes out, and they've won, right? They got the gold because the dragon is left, and they don't know what's going on, but they know they got the gold, and then these three armies show up,
mm-hmm.
and Oh wait a minute, two armies show up at first, right? Yes, two armies show up at first. It's the humans and the elves. They all want reparations for Smog, right? So now it's this big climatic thing. But no, there's more, because you know the orcs and the goblins show up, and they want it for themselves because now that Smog's out of the way. So everyone has to decide, well, maybe we shall ally against the orcs, and even still, it's going to be a titanic battle. They're not sure they can win, and yet again. Another group of NPCs that showed up earlier in the story arrive to aid in the conflict as well. Several, really, because Gandalf comes with the eagles.
Right.
So the Hobbit is such a great example of how these NPCs are kind of layered throughout. And those NPCs in some ways were kind of like more memorable to the players because they like the elves are very antagonistic against them. So like they remember the elves because we really don't like those guys. Those guys didn't treat us very well.
And you kind of have a similar mindset with the Lord of the Rings movies, which they wound up doing at first, and they were spectacularly driven movies, 3 to 4 hours a piece if you get into the extended cut editions. You wind up having all of these characters that get introduced very, very slowly, and all of them impact in some way, shape, or form. Elrond winds up springing throughout. Galadriel winds up springing throughout. All the different human NPCs that you wind up encountering, and all of them play a crucial part in their small way in getting to the end. Imagine if Éowyn decided she was not going to buck tradition and she would just decide to stay back. Well, then who's going to slay the Witch King? Like, how bad is that fight going to go if nobody takes this guy down? Is he going to run through the city and slaughter everyone?
And we don't get that great line, "I'm no man."
Wow. There is that, but that's a pivotal moment. And for her, it becomes a turning point in her life. It makes a great impact on the movie as a whole. And it's a cool thing as a takeaway.
Speaking of pivoting, we can pivot from our NPCs to our heroes with Heroics to Hit Dice, which you can find over at Nerdarchy, the store. Get your copy today.
So these NPCs, they are not the main characters. These are not ones that are greatly influencing they are greatly influencing the major story, but they're not the ones that are doing the main quest. They're not the ones that get to finish the ring. They don't get to slay the army. They're out there doing these great tasks and providing aspects to your story that need to be done without your player's direct involvement.
Well, also, let me help you out here a little bit. These are characters, the best NPCs are characters that could actually be PCs, right? Because they have their own lives, their own stories, their own things to tell. It's just that, conceptually in the game of Dungeons & Dragons, you have the players that are playing their characters and the NPCs that the DM is running. And ultimately, the story is about the players and their characters, and the DM is there with their non-player characters to support that story, not to circumvent it or circumnavigate it or take over, but to enhance it.
Right.
And sometimes part of that story might be for the players to help those NPCs find their roles and fill their roles and find their destiny, and it can go the other way as well. But as long as the action is being driven by the players in this particular instance. Now, if you were writing stories, it wouldn't matter, right? You can shift back and forth. Game of Thrones is another great example of how they introduce different characters, and the lines really blur between who is the main characters and who are the secondary characters. Like Braum, is he a main character or is he an NPC? I don't know. He shows up often enough, and he's pretty crucial throughout. But is he really just the NPC to Tyrion and the NPC to Jaime Lannister? It's hard to say, because of the way how well that is written. And your games should be like that too. If you took a step back and be like, oh wow, like if one of your players died and needed a character all of a sudden, if they wanted to play one of your NPCs instead, that means you've done a really good job of like crafting these NPCs and made them memorable and important to your game.
Now we look at these things, and yes, there should definitely be the difference between an NPC and a PC. If your players really do want to play that NPC, then awesome. You've given that character enough life that there's memory and there's meaning to your players at the table. And in doing so, we look at what CJ said and what we have going on here, that the MCU took 18 movies over 10 years just to get to the point of what Infinity War starts. That is an awful lot of work. Nothing that any other film franchise has done before. Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, both great trilogies, but that's it. It's a trilogy that many fantasy fans were in love with before Peter Jackson took over and made these great epics that they were. Now, if you want to introduce NPCs, feel free to not flood your game with them, but give an ample amount and allow your players to latch on to those that they really fall in love with, that they really find some connection with, and then you can slowly build that character out. Have something happen that the players need to help them out, or provide occasional backstory information, so that slowly but surely these characters that the players have fondness for because they've already chosen to interact with, they become more real. They become more a part of the world that they're playing in. And as the story goes on, these characters will be able to get enfolded into the greater plot that you have working.
And that's kind of like the advantage novels and role playing games have over a movie. They're constrained by time, where we can leisurely stroll through these things and really enjoy them. But the question is, what are you guys doing in your game? We got a place where you can tell us all about it. That's in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over on nerdarchy.com.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.